just do like a bit of an overview about how exits are typically structured. Like, is it in cash? Is it in stock? What kind of stock do they get? What does that look like normally? And what are some of the gotchas or the hidden catches that maybe some first-time founders fall into?
Yeah, so there are typical. I even did a post about it today, just an hour ago, about the typical deal structures that are involved in SaaS M&A. One is, of course, cash. Cash is king. Second one is a seller note. So that means if a buyer doesn't have the liquidity to buy the full purchase price, it allows a buyer to have more room in terms of valuation. So as a seller, you basically give a loan to the buyer. That means you just get a part of the purchase price later after a year or two, and it carries an interest. So for example, you sell for 4 million, you get 2 million upfront in cash, and 2 million is seller financing or seller notes, which matures with like a 5, 6, 7, 8% interest rate. And so you get this 2 million plus interest after 2 years. It often happens in smaller transactions because buyers may not have the necessary liquidity and could finance a deal from the revenue or ultimately profits the acquired businesses generates over time. Then we have earnouts. This is purely performance based on operational or financial goals. So it could be growth milestones, revenue milestones, profit milestones, or a combination of them. But also could be, for example, handover projects an acquirer wants you to complete. So documentation of code base or integration projects. And so the last one is stock swap. So from the story I told earlier, that means you're trading your equity for the equity of the acquirer. That often happens with VC-backed companies. So they raised a new round, they got a markup to their valuation, and they're going on a shopping spree to acquire similar businesses, complementary businesses, and use their high valuation to play like an arbitrage game. So they try to pick up business for cheap, and you get stock in the acquirer. As mentioned earlier, there's a risk because if the business is not doing well, the stock will basically be worthless. So you need to be sure that you can get an upside and that you believe in the model or believe in the company that's acquiring you, that they succeed, and you ultimately get more than just taking cash up front. So these are the 4 most common ones. We don't do stock swaps at saas.group. We had some founders reinvesting some of the proceeds, but we don't offer it in our offers. But we usually use a combination of cash, earnouts, and seller notes. And what founders need to know is if you're optimizing for cash, the valuation will be slightly lower because the risk for the buyer is higher because the risk transfers to the buyer right at closing. And if you have an earnout, there's still a shared risk, so they may be able to go higher, and also with the seller note. So depending on what you're opting for, there's more risk for you involved, but ultimately also more upside, and you need to decide yourself what you're optimizing for.
But it's not a question of just cash or just seller note. Like, there is a combination of those things in any deal, right?
Yes. So as a founder, I would probably never accept 100% seller financing with seller notes, basically handing over the business for free and hoping that you will get something if the business does well with the new owner. That's not something what I would do. I would also not accept a super high proportion of seller financing in general. Like 30% plus is at least a yellow flag, maybe even an orange one. Earnout, again, you have to be sure that you can drive the business going forward, and that you can hit those milestones. You agree with the buyer to really get an upside, because sometimes you also see earnouts structured in a very bad way, where the founder only gets something if they triple the growth rate or all of a sudden like double the business, while historical growth was more moderate. So you really need to make sure that you agree on those milestones, that you think they are achievable, and that they are aligned with your exit outcome actually. And we, for example, we usually take 70-80% cash, and then maybe 10% seller financing, 20% seller financing plus earnout on top.
That makes a lot of sense. I have a friend, like serial entrepreneur. He's 3 or 4 exits by now, I think. But it's for his most recent one, he got absolutely shafted because it was mostly in stock. And it was a publicly listed company, so he knew the share price and everything like that. But even though his business individually was doing really well, smashing all their goals within the acquirers, the much larger acquirers business, the overall business didn't do so well, and their stock price fell through the floor. So he said, that's like 3 years of work down the drain. Because his shares were effectively worthless at the end of it. I agree with you that cash is king. Some seller finance, some other stuff in there probably makes a bit of sense as well. But I personally, after you told me that story, I'm a little bit cautious on taking too much stock.
I think you can also find a lot of stories where it went super well and they ultimately got much more because the stock was skyrocketing or they had a big strategic exit. So you basically find stories on both sides, but you need to know that there's a risk involved, and it can go both ways, and
absolutely
you may end with nothing.
Hey, it's Ryan here. If you like that video, please click the like and subscribe button somewhere down there and check out the full interview right over here. Go on, click it. You know you want to.